Tonight on Brian Ross Investigates, the very latest on the coronavirus and a credibility gap between what the experts say and what the president says.
Because of all we've done, the risk to the American people remains very low.
Blaming the news media and the Democrats for causing panic.
It looks like the coronavirus being weaponized as yet another element to bring down Donald Trump.
We're joined by the former CIA station chief in Beijing and by the Harvard professor who warns that presidential bluster is no answer to this growing threat.
How is a sort of diffuse structure with no point person leading going to hold up?
Plus, a troubling update on the two Americans suing the royal family of the Arab Gulf state of Qatar.
He felt that he could do whatever he wanted, and he did.
Now the live-in girlfriend of one of the men, Matthew Allende, has been brutally attacked. Is there a connection? The victim's boyfriend will be here to make the case. Plus, our shout-out. Big news in South Carolina, but it's not the presidential primary. It's the indictment of one of the state's powerful sheriffs and the investigative reporter who first exposed him. From the Law&Crime Network studios in New York City's Herald Square, this is Brian Ross Investigates. Good evening and welcome. Tonight, as the world braces for more bad news about the coronavirus, there are new questions about the ability of the United States to effectively deal with the issue, given a credibility gap between what the president and supporters are saying about the severity of the threat and what his own experts have said. Who to believe, who to trust.
Because of all we've done, the risk to the American people remains very low.
Now, it's not so much a question of if this will happen anymore, but rather more a question of exactly when this will happen and how many people in this country will become infected and how many of those will develop severe or more complicated disease.
Hopefully, we're not going to have to spend so much because we really think we've done a great job in keeping it down to a minimum. And again, we've had tremendous success beyond what people would have thought.
It looks like the coronavirus being weaponized as yet another element to bring down Donald Trump.
So who to trust? And to get a reality check on all this, we're joined now by Randy Phillips, the former CIA station chief in Beijing and now vice chairman of the American Chamber of Commerce in China. And from Harvard, a public health expert, Dr. Margaret Bourdeaux of the Kennedy School Belfer Center. And Dr. Bourdeaux, let me start with you. This is spreading. You trust, I take it, the CDC, not the president saying everything is great.
Yes, I think that my level of concern has really grown since we last spoke. And that's because of both numbers coming from the CDC and also the World Health Organization about the estimations of the severity of those of the disease and those infected, and showing it to be quite substantial. And so just to say, anytime you have a new virus on your hands, you have to assume that your whole population could be susceptible. And so if your whole population is susceptible and the mortality rate is as high as some of the people in the World Health Organization and CDC are predicting, you really need to focus and realize we have a real issue on our hands here.
Randy Phillips, let me ask you, the stock market has been dramatically dropping this week because of concerns about this coronavirus. In China, how are they handling it? Do you trust the Chinese government to be telling us and the world the truth about what they're doing?
Well, it's been a little bit better than what we saw under SARS in 2003. It was a pretty low bar set at that time, and I recall very vividly at that time being in the U.S. government and having to deal with a variety of issues related to Americans and others being affected by this lack of transparency that was only overcome pretty late into the process. The Chinese government has been a little bit better this time around, but it's still, there's a tremendous level of cynicism on the part of the Chinese populace as well as the American business community in China that we are getting the true numbers. And that hasn't been helped by the fact that the Chinese authorities have actually changed the definition of how they define a case several times over the last couple of weeks. And so at this point, there is still a level of concern that we are getting the true numbers, but it on balance, has been better than what we saw the last time around.
All right, a question now from our control room from executive producer Rhonda Schwartz. Rhonda?
Dr. Bourdeaux, thousands of people get the flu all the time. Who's most vulnerable here, and why is it so much more serious?
Yes, so that's right. Every year we have folks that can get seasonal flu. The thing about seasonal flu is that your whole population isn't susceptible. Some portion have had the vaccine, others have had a similar type of flu before, so even if they're exposed to it, they don't get sick. This is a new virus, and that means that we have to assume our whole population is susceptible to it. So we have to assume that if we do nothing, that everybody could potentially get infected. And some of the numbers that are coming out of the World Health Organization are saying that the case fatality rate, the number of people who die if they are infected, is somewhere between 0.7% to 4%. And that is a very substantial number of people whose lives are at stake here. Now, I'm hoping every day that more information will come out to show that that is not, that number is inflated. But until that happens, we need to take this extraordinarily seriously and really start preparing ourselves for a major situation.
Randy Phillips, from your experience in the intelligence community, when people don't trust the government, don't trust what's being told to them about the severity of this, that's a real issue and hard to solve, isn't it?
No, it's a huge issue, and that's where I think it goes beyond just obviously the medical effects of what we're dealing with here. The Dr. Bourdeaux obviously covers quite well the severity of the medical issues at play here, but this also has a huge political, economic, and social consequences here that are only just beginning to play out. The fact that in China, in that case, there is already some very significant cynicism over what we have seen in terms of transparency from the government, and some extraordinary activity in social media in China showing tremendous doubt of trust in the government and that they're getting these straight facts. If you multiply that out in terms of other nations and that are already starting to deal with this in Italy, in Japan, in Iran, and knock wood, and the U.S., we'll see how that all plays out. But this is being able to lean on your national leadership and to be able to count on that you're getting the straight scoop in terms of what is happening. I mean, nothing gets the attention of somebody's mind more than, hey, I've got a tremendous disease heading my way and affecting my family, and I really expect my government to give me the straight facts.
All right, Randy Phillips and Dr. Bourdeaux, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Up next, a brutal attack on a California woman that her boyfriend says has potentially serious political implications. Tonight, a troubling update on a story we first brought you last year about two Americans suing the royal family of the Gulf state of Qatar. The royal family of the Mideast country of Qatar is the third richest family in the world. But now two Americans who worked for the royal family in Qatar are taking them on in this lawsuit filed in federal court in Tampa. In particular, taking on the Emir's brother, Sheikh Khalid Al Thani, alleged to be a heavy drug user who ordered the murders of two individuals in California who he viewed as threats to his social reputation and personal security. One of the men suing is Matthew Petard of Tampa, hired by the Sheikh to be chief of security for his family, seen here in a promotional video for a security company that the Sheikh founded.
He thinks he's a thug who's beyond reproach and can go after and do whatever he wants.
The other American suing the Sheikh is Matthew Allende of Los Angeles, a trained paramedic, brought in by Matthew Petard, the lawsuit says, after the Sheikh overdosed on opiates.
He had stopped breathing, his eyes rolled in the back of his head.
At first, both men worked for the Sheikh while he was in residence in California, his entourage taking up an entire floor of the Beverly Wilshire Hotel in Beverly Hills. So drugs and hookers were part of a regular routine at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel when he was in residence there?
Yes, sir.
The sheikh was already well known to police in Beverly Hills. In 2015, he was in the headlines after being caught on video drag racing in a Ferrari through the quiet residential streets of Beverly Hills.
One man who lives on the street almost got hit by one of these cars, and kids tonight tell me they're scared to play on the streets.
Get out.
Do you have anything
Get
to say?
out. None of your business.
He and his bodyguards at the time tried to act like tough guys with the man who made the video.
Get the out of here.
Did you know that?
Get the out of my property.
Okay. There, I'm not on your property. I told him that in America we have the free press and we are allowed to film from the sidewalk, and he said, F America, and threw a cigarette at me.
And then the sheikh later claimed falsely that he had diplomatic immunity to the outrage of the Beverly Hills police chief.
You can't claim diplomatic immunity if you don't have it, and you can't use that as an excuse to jeopardize the public or commit crimes.
They're the spoiled rich kids of the Middle East. That's what I viewed, how I saw it.
He bragged about the incident. Oh yeah, I was racing, through the streets. They've had me on the news, ha ha ha, that kind of thing. Nothing was taken seriously. He felt that he can do whatever he wanted, and he did.
But things got much more serious, Petard says, when the sheikh gave him an order to assassinate 2 individuals, one man, one woman, who he says the sheikh suspected were going to reveal his secrets.
This male had compromising photos of Sheikh at one of these parties, as well as some video and some other things. And so
he wanted you to kill him.
He told me, I want you to go take care of him.
What did that mean, take care?
To kill him.
Petard says when he refused, the sheikh was furious.
He said, you're not a real Marine. You disgust me. Get out of my sight. And no problem. I got up and left the suite.
But the pay was good at $100,000 a year, and both men traveled with the sheikh back to Qatar as he moved into his palace in the capital city of Doha. The 2 traveled with him wherever he went. This video was shot by Allende in the sheikh's police motorcade to the country's yearly National Day celebration. It wasn't long, the 2 men say, before they grew tired of the sheikh and his shady associations and continued, they say, drug use while in Qatar. But Petard says the sheikh threatened to kill him if he left, calling him disloyal.
He called me on the phone and basically said, you backstabbing piece of, I don't know, can I cuss on this?
Sure.
That's what you can bleep it out. You backstabbing piece of shit. I'm going to fucking kill you, bury you in the desert, and kill your family.
In the case of Allende, he says the sheikh refused to let him leave his compound, so he had to try to escape climbing over this 14 to 18-foot wall.
I chanced it because I felt that was a better alternative than being held against my will. I'm not going to be a prisoner to this man. And I jumped, instant pain to the left side of my body, fell to the ground.
Allende says he broke his leg and guards caught him and dragged him back inside the compound and then ordered him to go to the sheikh's bedroom.
Basically, I've broken you. You know you can't if I don't want you to. And that's all he wanted to know is you can't, he wanted me to know rather, was you can't go unless I say you can go. This man is corrupt, and as soon as you get over to where he's the law of the land, he can do whatever he wants.
Joining us now by Skype is Matthew Allende. And Matt, what's the update? It seems very troubling.
Yeah, very troubling indeed. Unfortunately, on January 14th, I had came home from work. I texted my girlfriend that I was on my way. I would be home at 6. I arrived at 6:45, a little bit late. I walked in the door. Nothing looked amiss in the house. I walked into the bedroom, and I saw her brutally beaten, blood all over the sheets, the walls. She was barely conscious. Then apparently she had declined en route to the hospital, went in critical condition, went into a coma, and they informed her mother, which was on her way from the East Coast, that she was not expected to make it through the night.
Now, she did make it through. The police are investigating, and you think there's a connection to the lawsuit that you filed and your appearance here?
Absolutely. We have to keep in mind the premise of this lawsuit in the first place. The lawsuit contains Matthew Petard, the other person, and the other plaintiff in this case, that he was asked by Prince Khalid to murder a male and a female while he was present here in the United States.
But Matt, you don't have any evidence of a direct connection to the Qatar royal family, do you?
As of this time, we do not. However, keep in mind this crime that occurred in the actual home. There was jewelry all over the bedroom, worth in the tens of thousands of dollars. Actual large bills present. Nothing was taken. The police from Pasadena police detectives has stated this crime is very uncommon, especially for our higher-end residents.
Now, by the way, let me point out, we asked the Qatar embassy for a reaction. They had no reaction, no comment at all. And the investigation is continuing. And you think it's going to point in the direction of retaliation because of your lawsuit?
Absolutely. I have no doubt. This is a pattern of behavior of Prince Khalid.
Let me ask you finally, how is your girlfriend doing now?
As of this time, she is out of the hospital. However, now she suffers from seizures because of the brain damage. She's has a very hard time doing simple math, and she was a corporate accountant.
All right.
So that's troubling. So she's
very
now,
troubling. Very troubling to hear all this, and thank you. Will you please keep us posted as we continue to follow this story?
Absolutely. I have a feeling we are going to get a lot more evidence. The detectives do have leads. So, yeah, I think that we're going to find out exactly what this was all about.
Matthew Allende, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Up next, our shout-out for the investigative reporter in South Carolina, covering a big story, not the presidential primary, but the indictment of one of the state's powerful sheriffs.
Our shout-out tonight for a top investigative journalist in South Carolina, Tony Bartlemy. While all eyes may be on that state for this Saturday's Democratic primary, this journalist has been keeping his attention on local politics, and in particular the alleged abuse of power by some of the state's most powerful elected officials.
No reaction to the taxpayers. Absolutely nothing.
It was a tip to a local investigative reporter that led this summer to prison time for powerful South Carolina prosecutor Dan Johnson. Reporter Tony Bartlemy of the Post and Courier in Charleston, South Carolina, found the evidence he needed for his story on the prosecutor in Johnson's own expense reports.
Nobody had looked at them yet. Nobody had sifted through them. So I got a hold of them, started looking through them, and a bunch of things just immediately popped out.
Including a $173 Uber ride in Minneapolis, where Bartlemy used to live.
And I thought, I bet you he went to Prince's house on the public's dime. And lo and behold, that's exactly what he did. And during that trip, he also spent money on a Major League Baseball game, the Twins. And from there, we started looking into other things like trips to the Galapagos Islands, first-class plane trips to all over the country, and things like that.
Bartlemy, who is the senior reporter on the Post and Courier's investigative team, says they decided to expand their probe into all official expense reports.
So we thought, what are other islands of government in South Carolina that kind of exist on their own without much scrutiny? And sheriffs immediately came to mind. And so we sought every spending record we could get from every county in the state, all 46 counties.
Suspended Greenville County Sheriff Will Lewis is facing more charges tonight.
Among those highlighted by Bartlemy was Sheriff Will Lewis of Greenville County, now facing criminal charges that he was using public money to carry on a sexual relationship with an employee who has now claimed she was raped. He has denied the charges and her claims.
Her allegations that basically forced her to have sex, forced her to do other things, and used that fear of termination, losing her job, as a cudgel.
Next was the sheriff of Florence County.
People who live in the area are speaking out after the man they elected, Sheriff Kenny Boone, was arrested and charged with embezzlement and misconduct in office.
Sheriff Kenny Boone is also now facing state charges as a result of Bartlemy's reporting. He too has pleaded not guilty.
Again, it was all these sort of questionable expenses for personal gain.
The most serious charges came following Bartlemy's story on Sheriff Alex Underwood.
Underwood had had a pattern of misbehavior ranging from assaults. He'd assaulted a couple of fire chiefs at a traffic stop. And also a man was live streaming a traffic wreck.
As the man was streaming his video on Facebook, Sheriff Underwood is seen approaching him and can be heard challenging him.
I'm doing a manhunt out here. I got somebody that's armed and dangerous out here. Get on the phone.
There was a scuffle. Essentially, Underwood and his deputies threw the guy in jail, cooked up a bunch of bogus charges, and then tried to cover up when the FBI began to investigate.
Sheriff Underwood is now under federal indictment. He has pleaded not guilty to the charges.
Well, when we put it all together, we produced, a very large package of stories that really kind of captured the scope and significance of and history of why sheriffs have gotten into trouble.
Bartleby says his editors know such investigative reporting takes time and money, but that they have decided it is the only way local newspapers can survive.
In the past few years, we've analyzed the data and we've found that people are more likely to subscribe to stories that are done with depth and quality. We found that the sheriff story, for instance, generated the most subscriptions of any story last year or this year. On a local level, it's really the only way we'll be able to survive. And we are finding that investigative journalism, though it's expensive, is what keeps people reading.
And now this month, yet another South Carolina sheriff has been indicted. Collinson County Sheriff Andy Strickland, accused of embezzling public money and using his power as a sheriff to coerce an employee into a sexual relationship. He has pleaded not guilty. That's our program for tonight. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you back here next week.